The year is 322 BCE. The Mediterranean world trembles with uncertainty. Alexander the Great lies dead in Babylon. His vast empire fractures like shattered pottery. In Athens, the winds of change howl through marble columns and torchlit streets. Anti-Macedonian sentiment surges like a tide of vengeance. An old man sits alone in a modest house on the island of Euboea. His weathered hands trace the rough parchment before him. 62 years of life have carved deep lines into his face. His eyes, once sharp enough to dissect the mysteries of existence itself, now dim with the approaching shadow of death. This is Aristotle, the most systematic mind in human history. The man who dared to categorize all knowledge, to explain the very fabric of reality. He fled Athens just months ago. The same city that forced Socrates to drink hemlock now burns with hatred for anything connected to Macedonia. Aristotle's 20 years as tutor to Alexander the Conqueror have marked him as an enemy of the state. The irony cuts deep. The philosopher who taught moderation and virtue, branded as a collaborator with tyranny. But tonight, in this exile that will become his tomb, something extraordinary pulses through the darkness. The ideas locked within this dying man's mind will not die with him. They will survive the collapse of empires. They will outlast the rise and fall of religions. They will shape human thought for over 2 millennia. Aristotle cannot know this. He cannot see the future spreading before him like an infinite scroll. He cannot see the Islamic scholars of Baghdad in the 9th century, hunched over Arabic translations of his works, preserving them when Christian Europe has forgotten his name. He cannot witness Thomas Aquinas in 13th century Paris, wrestling with Aristotelian logic to build the foundations of Christian theology. He cannot observe Charles Darwin in the 19th century, validating biological insights that this ancient Greek recorded by candlelight. The old philosopher shifts in his chair. His body fails, but his mind remains relentless. Even now, facing death, he continues to think, to question, to systematize. This compulsion to understand has defined his entire existence. From his childhood in Stagira, where he learned the art of observation from his physician father, through his 20 years under Plato's guidance in the academy, where he gradually forged his own revolutionary path, to his creation of the Lyceum, the first true research institution in human history. Outside his window, the Aegean Sea reflects starlight like scattered diamonds, the same stars Aristotle studied and catalogued, the same celestial sphere he used to construct his model of the cosmos, a model that, despite its flaws, will dominate human understanding of the universe for 15 centuries. His breathing grows shallow. Time contracts to this single moment, this quiet room, this failing body. Yet within this fragile vessel burns an intellectual fire that has already begun to transform civilization. His students carry copies of his lectures across the known world. His methods of logical reasoning will become the foundation of all Western thought. His ethical framework will guide human behavior long after the gods of Olympus crumble to dust. The paradox is staggering. This man, dying in political exile, has achieved a form of immortality that no conqueror could ever claim. Alexander's empire dissolved within a generation. Aristotle's empire of ideas will endure until the end of human consciousness itself. Every university that will ever exist owes its structure to principles he established. Every scientific discovery awaits validation against standards he created. Every political constitution echoes theories he developed while walking the covered paths of his school. Every ethical decision made in boardrooms and battlefields alike traces back to frameworks this dying philosopher constructed from pure thought. The lamp beside him flickers. The flame dances, casting shadows that seem to whisper of futures unimaginable. In those shadows move the great minds of centuries yet unborn. All of them, knowingly or not, students of the man whose breath now comes in short, labored gasps. Aristotle closes his eyes. Behind his lids, the vast architecture of his life's work arranges itself one final time. Logic and ethics, politics and poetics, biology and physics, metaphysics and astronomy. A complete system of human knowledge, organized with mathematical precision, built to last forever. He could not have imagined smartphones, but his principles of classification make their technology possible. He could not have foreseen democracy's global triumph, but his analysis of constitutional government provides its theoretical foundation. He could not have anticipated modern medicine, but his insistence on empirical observation launched the scientific revolution. The greatest teacher in human history prepares to become his own final lesson, a demonstration that ideas, properly conceived and systematically arranged, possess a power that transcends mortal flesh. That one human mind, applied with sufficient rigor and passion, can illuminate the path for all minds that follow. Dawn approaches across the Aegean. Soon this remarkable life will end. But the beginning of Western civilization's greatest intellectual adventure lies just ahead. The question that will haunt scholars for millennia hangs in the morning air. How did one man's mind become the foundation upon which all human knowledge would be built? Stagira, a small city perched on the rocky coastline of northern Greece. The year is 384 BCE. The world stands on the precipice of transformation. In distant Persia, Artaxerxes II rules an empire that stretches from India to Egypt. In Sicily, Greek tyrants wage war against Carthaginian invaders. In Athens, the democracy that executed Socrates 5 years prior struggles to maintain its grip on power. But here, in this unremarkable town overlooking the Aegean, something extraordinary begins. A child draws his first breath. His name is Aristoteles. History will know him simply as Aristotle. His father, Nicomachus, possesses a reputation that extends far beyond Stagira's modest walls. As court physician to King Amyntas III of Macedonia, he moves in circles of power that most Greeks will never glimpse. But more importantly, Nicomachus carries within him the accumulated medical wisdom of generations. His hands have opened bodies to understand the secrets of life itself. This matters more than royal connections or inherited wealth. This shapes everything. Watch the boy Aristotle as he follows his father through the narrow streets of Stagira. See how his young eyes absorb every detail. The way sunlight catches the scales of fish in the market. The precise movements of craftsmen shaping bronze. The methodical preparation of herbal medicines in his father's workshop. Nicomachus does not simply practice medicine. He embodies a revolutionary approach to understanding the world. Where others see mysterious forces and divine interventions, he sees patterns, causes and effects, natural processes that can be observed, measured, and predicted. The physician's son learns to dissect not just bodies, but reality itself. Every morning, Nicomachus examines patients with systematic precision. He observes symptoms, records their progression, notes which treatments succeed and which fail. Young Aristotle watches this process with the intensity of a hawk studying its prey. His father is teaching him something more profound than medicine. He is teaching him how to think. The ancient world trembles with superstition. Plagues descend from angry gods. Earthquakes result from Poseidon's rage. Mental illness springs from demonic possession. But in the physician's house in Stagira, a different understanding takes root. Disease follows natural laws. The body operates according to discernible principles. Knowledge comes through careful observation, not divine revelation. This empirical foundation will distinguish Aristotle from every philosopher who came before him. While Plato will construct elaborate theories about perfect forms existing in ideal realms, Aristotle will insist that truth lies in the world we can touch and measure. The difference between these approaches will split Western thought into two streams that flow through history to this very day. But the boy cannot yet comprehend such vast implications. He simply watches his father work. He learns to see patterns where others see chaos. The influence extends beyond methodology. Nicomachus serves the Macedonian royal court. This connection places young Aristotle at the intersection of Greek intellectual tradition and Macedonian political power. He absorbs the culture of the polis, the Greek city-state system, with its ideals of citizenship and rational discourse. Simultaneously, he witnesses the raw efficiency of Macedonian monarchy, the pragmatic exercise of authority that will soon reshape the entire Mediterranean world. These dual influences create a unique intellectual hybrid. Aristotle will combine Greek philosophical sophistication with Macedonian systematic organization. His mature works will display both the theoretical elegance of Athens and the practical thoroughness of Macedonia. He will become the philosopher administrator, the systematic thinker who can organize not just ideas, but entire schools of learning. The physician's library becomes the boy's second education. Ancient medical texts pile beside works of natural philosophy. Hippocratic treatises on the body neighbor cosmological speculations about celestial spheres. Aristotle devours them all with equal hunger. His mind develops an appetite for universal knowledge that will never be satisfied. But Stagira offers more than intellectual stimulation. The coastal location provides direct access to marine life that fascinate the developing naturalist. Aristotle spends countless hours examining sea creatures stranded by tides. He studies their anatomy, their behavior, their relationships to one another. These early biological investigations will later produce insights so accurate that modern scientists will marvel at their precision. The boy learns to classify, to categorize, to arrange observations into systematic hierarchies that reveal underlying structures. Every tide pool becomes a laboratory. Every dissection becomes a lesson in the fundamental organization of life itself. His father recognizes extraordinary potential in his son. Nicomachus begins formal instruction in rhetoric and logic. He teaches the boy to construct arguments with surgical precision, to examine propositions for hidden assumptions, to trace complex chains of reasoning to their ultimate foundations. These skills will prove essential when Aristotle eventually encounters the philosophical schools of Athens. Unlike students who arrive overwhelmed by the city's intellectual complexity, he will possess tools sharp enough to dissect even Plato's most sophisticated theories. The geographic location contributes another crucial element. Stagira sits at the crossroads between Greek and barbarian cultures. Thracian traders bring exotic goods and foreign ideas through the town's markets. Persian merchants carry news of distant philosophical traditions. Young Aristotle absorbs this cosmopolitan atmosphere, developing the broad perspective that will later enable him to synthesize knowledge from multiple civilizations. He learns early that truth recognizes no national boundaries, that useful ideas can emerge from any culture willing to observe nature carefully. This intellectual openness will distinguish his mature philosophy from the narrow prejudices that limit lesser minds. Tragedy strikes when Aristotle reaches adolescence. Nicomachus dies, leaving his son orphaned in a world suddenly stripped of guidance. The loss cuts deep, but it also liberates. The systematic methods his father taught him become not just intellectual tools, but survival strategies. The boy who learned to dissect bodies now learns to dissect life's challenges with equal precision. His guardian, Proxenus, makes a decision that will alter the course of human thought. He sends the 17-year-old Aristotle to Athens, to the academy, to study under the greatest philosopher of the age, to study under Plato. The journey south represents more than geographic movement. It marks the transition from preparation to destiny. The systematic mind forged in Stagira's workshops will soon encounter the soaring idealism of Athenian philosophy. The collision between empirical observation and theoretical speculation will generate intellectual sparks that illuminate Western civilization for centuries to come. But first, the young man must survive the boat journey across dangerous seas. He must navigate the political complexities of a city still traumatized by military defeat and philosophical scandal. He must prove himself worthy of admission to the most exclusive intellectual circle in the ancient world. As his ship disappears over the horizon, Stagira loses its most famous son, but the world gains something infinitely more valuable: a mind equipped with the tools necessary to systematically explore every corner of human knowledge, an intellect trained from birth to see patterns, to organize observations, to construct comprehensive theories from careful empirical foundation. The physician's son carries his father's legacy toward an appointment with immortality. Athens, 367 BCE. The dust of summer settles over marble columns and olive groves. Through the Dipylon gate walks a 17-year-old from the northern frontier. His clothes mark him as provincial. His accent betrays Macedonian influences. His eyes burn with intellectual hunger that will not be satisfied. Aristotle has arrived in the center of the civilized world. The city sprawls before him like a living textbook of human achievement. Here, Pericles built the Parthenon. Here, Aeschylus and Sophocles staged the tragedies that still echo through time. Here, Socrates questioned every assumption until the state silenced him with hemlock. Here, democracy was born, flourished, and learned to devour its own children. But none of this compares to what awaits him in the grove of Academus, just outside the city walls. The Academy stands as humanity's first university. Founded 20 years earlier by Plato, it attracts the finest minds from across the Mediterranean. Mathematicians from Egypt debate with astronomers from Babylon. Rhetoricians from Sicily match wits with logicians from Asia Minor. The air itself seems charged with intellectual electricity. Above the entrance, an inscription proclaims, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here." The warning serves its purpose. Only the mathematically literate dare pass beneath those words. Only minds equipped for abstract reasoning attempt to penetrate the mysteries within. Young Aristotle reads the inscription and feels no hesitation. His father's empirical training has given him something rarer than geometric knowledge. He possesses systematic methodology, the ability to organize complex observations into coherent patterns. This skill will prove more revolutionary than any theorem. He enters the Academy's gardens and encounters intellectual paradise. Students and teachers stroll among plane trees and olive groves, engaged in endless philosophical discussion. No bells signal class changes, no rigid schedules constrain inquiry. Learning flows as naturally as conversation, as organically as the seasons themselves. Questions arise from genuine curiosity rather than academic obligation. Answers emerge through collaborative reasoning rather than authoritative decree. But at the center of this intellectual cosmos stands one towering figure, Plato himself. Already 60 years old, his reputation extends far beyond Athens. His dialogues have preserved Socrates' memory, while developing philosophical insights that challenge every conventional assumption about reality, knowledge, and virtue. The first encounter between teacher and student crackles with unspoken tension. Plato sees in the young Macedonian a mind capable of grasping the Academy's highest teachings, but he also detects something unsettling, an insistence on grounding abstract theories in concrete observations, a resistance to purely conceptual reasoning, a stubborn empiricism that threatens the very foundations of Platonic philosophy. Aristotle sees in Plato the most sophisticated intellectual he has ever encountered. But he also recognizes dangerous tendencies, an excessive reliance on mathematical analogies, a willingness to construct elaborate theories without sufficient empirical verification, a mystical streak that subordinates observation to speculation. The collision between these approaches will redefine Western thought. Plato teaches that ultimate reality exists beyond the physical world. His famous theory of forms posits perfect, eternal archetypes, of which material objects are merely imperfect copies. The true circle exists not in any drawn figure, but in an ideal realm accessible only through pure reason. Justice, beauty, and goodness similarly transcend their earthly manifestations, achieving perfect form in a dimension beyond sensory experience. This theory explains how knowledge is possible despite the constant flux of material existence. It provides philosophical foundations for mathematics and ethics. It offers hope that human reason can transcend the limitations of mortal flesh to grasp eternal truths. But Aristotle cannot accept such radical separation between thought and experience. His father's medical training rebels against theories that ignore empirical evidence. His systematic observations of marine life in Stagira contradict claims that material reality represents mere shadow and illusion. His logical training detects flaws in arguments that leap too quickly from mathematical analogies to metaphysical conclusions. The student begins to challenge the master with respectful but relentless questioning. In dialogue after dialogue, Aristotle probes the weak points in Platonic theory. If perfect forms exist in an ideal realm, how do imperfect material copies participate in their perfection? What mechanism connects eternal archetypes with temporal manifestations? How can human minds, trapped in physical bodies, achieve knowledge of purely spiritual realities? Plato responds with patience and growing respect. This northern provincial possesses rare intellectual gifts. His objections force clarification and refinement of academic doctrine. His systematic approach generates insights that even seasoned philosophers find illuminating. But beneath the surface courtesy, fundamental disagreement grows like a crack in foundation stone. The tension manifests most clearly in their approach to biological investigation. Plato regards physical bodies as prisons that constrain immortal souls. Detailed anatomical study seems pointless when true understanding requires transcendence of material limitations. Mathematical relationships between geometric forms offer more reliable knowledge than messy empirical observations. Aristotle spends increasing amounts of time in practical dissection and classification. He studies animal reproduction, plant growth, and anatomical structures with obsessive thoroughness. His notebooks fill with detailed observations that reveal patterns invisible to purely theoretical analysis. He discovers that careful empirical study generates insights more profound than abstract speculation. The philosophical divergence accelerates during Aristotle's second decade at the Academy. By now, he has mastered Platonic dialogue technique. He can construct arguments with devastating logical precision. He can identify hidden assumptions and trace complex reasoning chains to their ultimate foundations. But he uses these skills not to defend academic orthodoxy, but to expose its limitations. His fellow students begin calling him the mind of the school. Plato himself refers to his northern protege as the reader, acknowledging his voracious appetite for written knowledge. But intellectual recognition cannot bridge the growing methodological chasm. Aristotle develops his own approaches to logic, ethics, and natural philosophy. His logical system grounds validity in empirical observation rather than mathematical intuition. His ethical framework emphasizes practical wisdom and character development over abstract contemplation of perfect virtue. His natural philosophy insists that understanding emerges through systematic study of actual phenomena, not theoretical speculation about ideal forms. These innovations represent more than academic disagreement. They signal the emergence of an entirely new way of understanding reality itself. The break becomes inevitable when Plato announces his intention to found a new colony in Sicily, governed according to philosophical principles derived from pure reason. The project embodies everything Aristotle has learned to distrust about academic methodology. It attempts to impose theoretical ideals on complex political realities without adequate empirical investigation of local conditions and cultural constraints. Aristotle declines to participate. For the first time in 20 years, student and teacher find themselves on opposite sides of a fundamental issue. The final rupture arrives with Plato's death in 347 BCE. The Academy's leadership passes not to Aristotle, despite his obvious intellectual qualifications, but to Plato's nephew Speusippus. The decision reflects more than family politics. It represents the Academy's commitment to preserving Platonic orthodoxy against Aristotelian innovation. Aristotle recognizes that his intellectual development requires independence from academic constraints. At 37, he possesses the knowledge and confidence necessary to forge his own philosophical path. The systematic methodology learned in Stagira, refined through 20 years of Athenian dialogue, stands ready to tackle the greatest intellectual challenges in human history. But first, he must establish his own school. He must attract students capable of appreciating his revolutionary approach. He must develop organizational structures that can support sustained empirical investigation on an unprecedented scale. Most importantly, he must prove that systematic empiricism can generate knowledge more reliable and useful than pure theoretical speculation. As he prepares to leave the Academy forever, Aristotle carries within his mind the seeds of intellectual revolution. The next phase of his career will see those seeds grow into the comprehensive system that defines Western learning to this day. The student has become ready to surpass his teacher. The question remaining is whether the world is ready for what Aristotle will unleash upon it. Pella, Macedonia. 343 BCE. The royal palace hums with barely contained ambition. King Philip II has transformed Macedonia from a backward mountain kingdom into the dominant power in Greece. His military innovations crush traditional phalanx formations. His political maneuvering outflanks Athenian diplomats. His vision extends beyond mere conquest to the systematic unification of the Greek world under Macedonian authority. But Philip understands that military success requires more than superior tactics. Cultural legitimacy demands intellectual credibility. To rule Greeks, one must master Greek learning. To lead civilization, one must embody its highest achievements. He needs a teacher for his 13-year-old son. Not just any teacher, the finest philosophical mind in the ancient world. He summons Aristotle. The invitation arrives like lightning across a clear sky. Aristotle has spent the 3 years since leaving the academy in relative obscurity, conducting biological research on the island of Lesbos. His systematic studies of marine life have generated insights that will astound naturalists for centuries. His methodological innovations have refined empirical investigation to unprecedented precision. But intellectual achievement means nothing without institutional support. Philip offers something beyond mere patronage. He offers the opportunity to shape a mind that will reshape history itself. Young Alexander possesses qualities that immediately captivate his new tutor: physical courage that borders on recklessness, intellectual curiosity that devours knowledge like flame consuming parchment, strategic imagination that sees patterns invisible to conventional military thinking. Most remarkably, an intuitive understanding that conquest alone cannot build lasting empire. The prince grasps what his father sometimes forgets, that ruling diverse peoples requires more than superior force. Aristotle recognizes extraordinary potential in his royal student, but he also perceives dangerous tendencies. Alexander's hero worship of Achilles suggests romantic attachment to glorious death rather than systematic achievement. His emotional volatility indicates insufficient self-control for rational governance. His Macedonian contempt for barbarian peoples contradicts the universal principles that must undergird any truly great civilization. The tutorial relationship becomes a laboratory for testing whether philosophical education can temper unlimited ambition with practical wisdom. They meet in the gardens of Mieza, a secluded retreat that Philip has constructed specifically for his son's education. Here, surrounded by carefully tended groves and crystal streams, the greatest systematic thinker in history attempts to impose intellectual discipline on unlimited royal prerogative. The curriculum reflects Aristotelian comprehensiveness: ethics and politics, logic and rhetoric, natural philosophy and mathematics, poetry and history. Alexander must master not just the techniques of leadership, but the underlying principles that make leadership legitimate. Most crucially, Aristotle emphasizes the distinction between rule over Greeks and rule over barbarians. Greeks, as rational beings capable of self-governance, deserve constitutional government that respects their inherent dignity. Barbarians, lacking fully developed rational faculties, require more direct administrative control, but should be treated with justice rather than mere exploitation. This framework will profoundly influence Alexander's later imperial policies. His decision to adopt Persian court customs, to marry Asian nobility, to integrate conquered peoples into his administration, reflects Aristotelian teaching about the universal character of rational governance. The philosopher's systematic approach to understanding different cultures provides the future conqueror with tools for managing unprecedented ethnic diversity. But intellectual influence flows in both directions. Alexander's strategic brilliance forces Aristotle to reconsider traditional Greek assumptions about political scale. The polis system that dominates Greek thinking assumes that effective governance requires direct citizen participation in public decisions. This limits political communities to sizes where individual voices can be heard and recognized. Alexander's territorial ambitions transcend such constraints completely. How can philosophical principles designed for city-states apply to continental empires? How can rational governance function across vast distances and among incompatible cultures? How can individual virtues scale up to administrative systems encompassing millions of subjects? These questions push Aristotelian political theory in directions that will influence constitutional thinking for centuries. The tutorial relationship becomes a workshop for developing frameworks that can accommodate both philosophical idealism and imperial practicality. The intellectual partnership reaches its apex through joint study of Homer's epics. Alexander memorizes the Iliad with passionate devotion, carrying a personal copy throughout his later campaigns. But Aristotle guides this literary engagement towards systematic analysis rather than mere emotional identification. They examine leadership techniques displayed by Homeric heroes, They analyze the relationship between individual excellence and collective achievement. They study the tragic consequences that follow when personal ambition overwhelms rational restraint. The poems become case studies in applied ethics rather than simple adventure stories. This analytical approach to literary masterworks will become a cornerstone of Western education. Future scholars will follow Aristotelian precedent by treating great texts as sources of practical wisdom rather than mere aesthetic pleasure. The systematic study of literature as a guide to human behavior begins in these tutorials between philosopher and future world conqueror. But beneath the intellectual collaboration, deeper tensions develop. Aristotle's empirical methodology demands careful observation and gradual theory construction based on accumulated evidence. Alexander's temperament craves immediate action and dramatic results. The philosopher counsels moderation and systematic planning. The prince dreams of surpassing even Achilles in the scope of his achievements. These temperamental differences reflect incompatible approaches to human excellence itself. Aristotelian virtue emphasizes consistent character development through habitual practice of rational behavior. Alexandrian heroism seeks transcendence of normal human limitations through moments of extraordinary achievement. The tutorial arrangement lasts only 3 years. In 340 BCE, 16-year-old Alexander assumes his first independent military command, leading successful campaigns that demonstrate precocious strategic genius. His formal education ends, but its influence will echo across continents and centuries. Aristotle returns to Athens to establish the Lyceum. Alexander begins the conquests that will spread Greek culture from Spain to India. Teacher and student will never meet again, but their intellectual connection continues to shape both of their achievements. The philosopher's systematic approach to organizing knowledge will enable the comprehensive research programs that distinguish the Lyceum from all previous educational institutions. The conqueror's vision of universal empire will create the cosmopolitan Hellenistic world where such research programs can flourish across unprecedented geographic and cultural boundaries. More profoundly, their collaboration establishes the model for productive interaction between theoretical wisdom and practical power. Future rulers will seek philosophical education not merely for personal cultivation, but as essential preparation for the complex challenges of governance. Future philosophers will recognize that their theoretical insights require institutional support and practical application to achieve maximum impact. The tutorial relationship at Misa launches 2 parallel revolutions that will converge to create Western civilization as we know it. Aristotelian systematic methodology will provide the intellectual foundations. Alexandrian political vision will provide the institutional structures necessary for those foundations to support sustained cultural achievement. But first, both teacher and student must prove that their revolutionary approaches can succeed in the harsh testing ground of reality itself. The next decade will determine whether systematic philosophy and universal empire represent genuine advances in human capability or merely sophisticated forms of traditional Greek intellectual pride. The stakes could not be higher. The future of human civilization hangs in the balance. Athens, 335 BCE. The city that once condemned Socrates now welcomes back its most systematic son. 13 years have passed since Aristotle left the academy. 13 years of exile, research and royal tutoring. 13 years during which his former student Alexander has carved an empire from the Mediterranean to the Indus River. The political winds that once forced the philosopher to flee have shifted completely. Macedonia now dominates Greece. Anti-Macedonian sentiment has been crushed beneath the weight of military reality. Aristotle returns not as a suspected collaborator, but as the honored teacher of the world's greatest conqueror. His reputation precedes him like morning light dispelling shadows. But he comes back transformed, no longer the promising academy student wrestling with Platonic orthodoxy, no longer the provincial scholar dependent on institutional charity. He returns as a revolutionary ready to overthrow 2,000 years of educational tradition. The location he chooses for his school sends a clear message. Not the exclusive academy with its aristocratic pretensions. Not some private gymnasium accessible only to the wealthy elite. Instead, he selects the Lyceum, a public space dedicated to Apollo Lyceus, the wolf-slaying god of light and knowledge. Here, beside the temple, surrounded by gardens and covered walkways, Aristotle will construct humanity's first true research institution. The innovation seems subtle at first glance. Students and teachers walking together along shaded paths, engaged in animated discussion. The peripatetic method appears to differ little from academy practice, but beneath the familiar surface, a revolution in human learning begins to unfold. Aristotle does not merely teach philosophy, he systematically investigates reality itself. The first shock comes with his organizational structure. Previous schools focused on training students to think like their founders. The academy produced Platonists. The various Socratic schools generated followers of particular masters. Individual personality dominated institutional purpose. The Lyceum abandoned such hero worship. Instead, it organizes knowledge according to subject matter rather than biographical tradition. Logic becomes a separate discipline with its own methods and principles. Ethics develops independent of particular philosophical personalities. Natural philosophy establishes autonomous research programs guided by empirical evidence rather than theoretical allegiance. This structural revolution makes collaborative investigation possible for the first time in human history. Watch the Lyceum's morning routine unfold. In one corner of the complex, botanists catalog plant specimens according to systematic classification schemes. Their observations fill carefully maintained records that accumulate data across seasons and years. Patterns emerge that no individual observer could detect through casual study. Nearby zoologists dissect animal specimens with surgical precision. Their anatomical drawings achieve accuracy that will not be surpassed for over 1,000 years. They trace blood vessels, map nervous systems, and document reproductive processes with methodical thoroughness that transforms biology from speculation into science. In adjacent workshops, political theorists analyze constitutions gathered from across the Greek world. They compare governmental structures, document historical patterns, and develop theoretical frameworks for understanding why some systems succeed while others fail. Their research produces insights that will guide constitutional design for centuries to come. The most revolutionary innovation involves written documentation. Previous philosophical schools relied primarily on oral tradition. Masters taught selected students through personal dialogue. Knowledge remained locked within individual relationships, vulnerable to memory failures and personal interpretation. Aristotle transforms this entire approach. He requires systematic written records of all investigations. Lecture notes become permanent documents available for future reference and revision. Research findings accumulate in libraries accessible to qualified scholars, regardless of personal connections to original investigators. The implications stagger contemporary observers. Knowledge begins to transcend individual mortality. Discoveries made by one generation become foundations for the next. Systematic investigation replaces inspired insight as the preferred method for advancing understanding, but the most profound transformation involves the scope of inquiry itself. Previous philosophers specialized in narrow domains. Mathematicians studied numbers and geometric relationships. Political theorists analyzed governmental structures. Natural philosophers speculated about cosmic principles. Each discipline developed independently, often in isolation from related fields. Aristotle refuses to accept such fragmentation. His systematic mind perceives underlying connections that link all domains of knowledge. Logic provides tools useful in mathematics, politics, and natural philosophy alike. Ethical principles apply to individual character development and constitutional design equally. Biological observations illuminate cosmic structures and vice versa. The Lyceum becomes humanity's first attempt at universal knowledge integration. The research programs that emerge defy traditional boundaries between disciplines. Students trained in logic apply their skills to biological classification. Natural philosophers contribute to political analysis. Ethicists draw upon astronomical observations to illuminate questions about human purpose and cosmic order. This interdisciplinary approach generates insights impossible within narrow specialization. Aristotle's own investigations demonstrate the power of systematic integration. His biological studies inform his logical theories. His political research influences his ethical framework. His metaphysical speculations draw upon empirical observations from multiple fields. The library that grows within the Lyceum represents another revolutionary innovation. Unlike previous collections focused on literary masterworks or religious texts, Aristotelian scholars systematically gather information from diverse sources. They collect constitutions from Greek city-states. They catalog astronomical observations from Babylonian priests. They record medical knowledge from Egyptian physicians. This comparative approach to learning transforms isolated cultural achievements into universal human knowledge. The Lyceum becomes more than a Greek institution. It evolves into a center for international intellectual cooperation that transcends ethnic and political boundaries. The teaching methodology reflects these broader innovations. Rather than requiring students to memorize established doctrines, Aristotle trains them to conduct independent investigations using systematic methods. They learn to observe carefully, to record accurately, to analyze objectively, and to draw conclusions based on evidence rather than authority. The graduation requirement involves original research that contributes to the school's growing knowledge base. Students must demonstrate mastery not just of existing theories, but of the investigative techniques necessary to extend understanding into previously unexplored domains. This approach produces a new type of scholar, not disciples bound to particular doctrines, but researchers equipped with tools for independent inquiry. The Lyceum graduates carry systematic methodology to institutions across the Mediterranean world. They establish subsidiary research centers that maintain intellectual connections with the mother school while investigating local phenomena and cultural traditions. Within a single generation, the Lyceum network extends from Sicily to Asia Minor. Systematic empirical investigation begins to replace traditional approaches to learning throughout the Greek-speaking world. The intellectual revolution that began in Aristotle's mind spreads like beneficial contagion across an entire civilization. But the most lasting innovation involves the creation of what will later be called the scientific method. Aristotelian investigation follows consistent principles regardless of subject matter. Careful observation precedes theoretical speculation. Multiple sources of evidence support major conclusions. Alternative explanations receive systematic consideration. Findings remain open to revision based on new evidence or improved analysis. These methodological principles establish standards for reliable knowledge that transcend individual opinion or cultural prejudice. They provide tools for distinguishing genuine insight from wishful thinking, empirical discovery from theoretical speculation, probable truth from mere possibility. The impact on human civilization cannot be overstated. Every university that will ever exist follows organizational principles pioneered at the Lyceum. Every scientific discipline traces its methodological foundations to Aristotelian innovations. Every research library reflects systematic approaches to knowledge preservation and dissemination that begin in these covered walkways beside Apollo's temple. More profoundly, the Lyceum demonstrates that human reason, properly organized and systematically applied, can penetrate the deepest mysteries of existence itself. Individual mortality need not limit intellectual achievement. Collaborative investigation can accomplish what no single mind could ever achieve alone. As evening shadows lengthen across the Lyceum gardens, Aristotle reviews the day's research reports, botanical discoveries from the morning, anatomical observations from the afternoon, political analyses from constitutional scholars, logical innovations from advanced students. Each document represents a small victory of human understanding over cosmic mystery. Each systematic observation adds another stone to the growing structure of reliable knowledge. Each methodological refinement brings humanity closer to comprehending the rational principles that govern reality itself. The revolution has begun. Within these peaceful gardens, the future of human learning takes shape. The question that will define the next 2 millennia of intellectual development has been posed. Can systematic empirical investigation unlock all the secrets of existence? Aristotle believes the answer is yes. The next phase of his career will put that belief to the ultimate test. The morning light streams through the Lyceum's columns as Aristotle stands before a table covered with manuscripts. Logic treatises lie beside biological drawings. Political analyses rest next to astronomical charts. Ethical frameworks interweave with physical theories. The accumulated knowledge of a lifetime spreads before him like a vast intellectual map. This is not mere scholarly accumulation. This represents humanity's first systematic attempt to explain everything that exists. No mind in history has dared to embrace such comprehensive ambition. Previous thinkers specialized in narrow domains, content to master limited territories of understanding. Aristotle refuses such intellectual timidity. His systematic approach recognizes no boundaries between disciplines. His empirical methodology applies equally to the behavior of atoms and the movements of planets. His logical framework governs analysis of political constitutions and biological classifications alike. He has constructed nothing less than a complete science of reality itself. The foundation begins with logic, the tool that makes all other knowledge possible. Aristotle does not merely practice logical reasoning. He invents the formal study of reasoning itself. His syllogistic method provides the first systematic account of how valid conclusions follow from true premises. His logical categories organize all possible subjects of thought into coherent classifications. Watch him demonstrate syllogistic reasoning to advanced students. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. The argument seems almost childishly simple, but within its structure lies the key to all rational demonstration. Every valid argument, regardless of subject matter, must follow patterns that Aristotelian logic makes explicit. This logical framework becomes the universal language of systematic inquiry. Whether investigating biological specimens or analyzing political constitutions, researchers must trace their reasoning according to principles that Aristotle has codified. Logic provides the methodological consistency that transforms isolated observations into comprehensive scientific knowledge. But logic alone cannot generate understanding of the natural world. Empirical investigation must reveal the actual structure of existing things. Here, Aristotle's biological research demonstrates the power of systematic observation applied to complex phenomena. His anatomical studies achieve precision that will not be equaled for over a millennium. He dissects hundreds of animal species, mapping circulatory systems, documenting reproductive processes, and tracing embryonic development with meticulous care. His drawings of shark anatomy remain accurate by modern standards. His observations of bee behavior anticipate discoveries that will not be confirmed until the invention of the microscope. Most remarkably, he develops the first comprehensive system of biological classification. Every living organism finds its place within hierarchical categories that reflect actual structural relationships. His taxonomy groups creatures according to fundamental similarities while distinguishing them through specific differences. The method provides logical organization for the bewildering diversity of life forms that populate Earth, sea, and sky. This biological framework extends far beyond mere classification. Aristotle perceives that living organisms exhibit purposive behavior that distinguishes them from inanimate matter. Plants grow towards sunlight. Animals seek food and shelter. Reproduction ensures species survival across generations. These teleological patterns suggest that nature itself operates according to rational principles, discoverable through careful investigation. The insight revolutionizes natural philosophy. Instead of viewing the physical world as chaotic matter, moved by blind forces, Aristotle recognizes systematic organization that exhibits intelligent design. Nature becomes a rational system whose principles human reason can comprehend and articulate. His physics develops these insights into a comprehensive account of cosmic structure. The universe divides into distinct regions governed by different natural laws. Terrestrial phenomena follow patterns observable through ordinary experience. Heavy objects fall toward Earth. Light objects rise toward their natural positions. Motion requires continuous application of force to overcome natural resistance. But celestial phenomena operate according to entirely different principles. The sun, moon, planets, and stars move in perfect circular patterns that continue eternally without external compulsion. These celestial bodies consist of a fifth element, more perfect than any terrestrial substance, that naturally moves in circular paths around the cosmic center, where Earth rests in stable equilibrium. This geocentric model will dominate astronomical thinking for 15 centuries. Its mathematical elegance appeals to theoretical astronomers. Its observational accuracy satisfies practical navigators. Its philosophical coherence integrates physical observations with metaphysical principles about cosmic order and rational purpose. Aristotelian ethics applies the same systematic approach to questions of human behavior and character development. Instead of seeking abstract definitions of perfect virtue, he investigates how actual people achieve happiness through practical wisdom and moral excellence. His analysis begins with careful observation of human psychology. People naturally desire happiness, but they disagree about what happiness involves. Some identify it with pleasure, others with honor, still others with theoretical contemplation. Aristotelian investigation reveals that genuine happiness requires the actualization of distinctively human capacities through virtuous activities sustained over a complete lifetime. This approach grounds ethics in empirical study of human nature rather than theoretical speculation about ideal forms. Virtue becomes a matter of developing practical wisdom through habitually choosing the mean between extremes of excess and deficiency. Courage lies between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity falls between stinginess and profligacy. Justice involves proportional distribution according to merit and need. The framework provides practical guidance for individual character development, while establishing philosophical foundations for political organization. Communities exist to promote human flourishing through institutional arrangements that encourage virtuous behavior and discourage vice. Aristotelian political theory extends ethical insights to the analysis of governmental structures. His researchers collect and analyze over 150 constitutions from Greek city-states, documenting the institutional arrangements that distinguish successful from failed political systems. The investigation reveals that legitimate government must serve the common good rather than narrow factional interests. Monarchy, aristocracy, and constitutional democracy can all achieve legitimate authority when properly structured and virtuously administered. But each system tends toward corruption unless institutional safeguards prevent the concentration of power in irresponsible hands. These political insights will influence constitutional design throughout Western history. The separation of powers, mixed government, and the rule of law all trace their theoretical foundations to Aristotelian analysis of how institutional arrangements can channel human ambition toward constructive rather than destructive purposes. The philosophical capstone of the entire system emerges in Aristotle's metaphysical investigations. Here he addresses the ultimate questions that have haunted human consciousness since thought began. What does it mean for something to exist? How do particular things relate to universal categories? What accounts for change and permanence in the natural world? His answers integrate insights from logic, natural philosophy, ethics, and politics into a unified account of reality's fundamental structure. Existence involves the actualization of potential through form-giving principles that organize matter according to rational patterns. Individual substances achieve their essential nature through the realization of capacities that define their species membership. This metaphysical framework explains how systematic knowledge becomes possible. Human reason can comprehend natural patterns because rational principles govern both cosmic structure and intellectual activity. The mind that investigates reality participates in the same logical order that organizes the phenomena under investigation. The implications extend beyond theoretical philosophy to practical applications that will shape human civilization for centuries. Aristotelian systematic methodology provides tools for advancing knowledge in every domain of inquiry. His logical principles establish standards for valid reasoning regardless of subject matter. His empirical approach demonstrates how careful observation can penetrate natural mysteries that resist purely theoretical analysis. More profoundly, the universal system reveals the essential unity underlying apparent diversity. The same rational principles that govern logical demonstration also structure biological classification, political organization, and cosmic order. Reality exhibits systematic coherence that makes comprehensive understanding theoretically achievable. As evening settles over the Lyceum, Aristotle surveys his life's work with quiet satisfaction. The manuscripts scattered across his table represent more than personal achievement. They constitute humanity's first successful attempt to organize all reliable knowledge according to rational principles that transcend individual opinion and cultural prejudice. Students will carry these systematic methods to schools throughout the Mediterranean world. Future generations will build upon Aristotelian foundations to extend understanding into domains he could never have imagined. The universal system provides not just answers to current questions, but tools for investigating questions that have not yet been formulated. The revolution in human learning has achieved its first major victory. Systematic empirical investigation has proven capable of penetrating mysteries that once seemed beyond rational comprehension. The question that will challenge future centuries has been posed with unprecedented clarity. Are there any limits to what organized human intelligence can ultimately achieve? But even as this intellectual triumph takes shape, political forces gather that will test whether systematic knowledge can survive the collapse of the civilization that gave it birth. Toledo, Spain, 1187 CE. The morning sun casts long shadows across cobblestone streets where three civilizations converge. Christian knights from the North patrol ramparts recently conquered from Muslim rulers. Jewish merchants conduct business in languages that blend Hebrew, Arabic, and emerging Romance tongues. Islamic scholars quietly tend libraries filled with manuscripts that Christian Europe has forgotten for 8 centuries. In a modest scriptorium near the cathedral, an extraordinary transformation begins. Gerard of Cremona, an Italian monk, sits hunched over parchment covered with Arabic script. His weathered fingers trace symbols that unlock secrets more valuable than any treasure hoard. Word by word, line by line, he translates Aristotle's lost works back into Latin. The resurrection of Western learning has begun. For nearly a millennium, Aristotelian systematic methodology has survived only in the Islamic world. While European monasteries preserved fragments of classical logic and ethics, the comprehensive empirical investigations that defined Aristotelian science vanished completely from Christian consciousness. The biological observations, astronomical calculations, and natural philosophical theories that once revolutionized human understanding gathered dust in libraries from Baghdad to Cordoba. But the Christian reconquest of Islamic territories in Spain creates unprecedented opportunities for intellectual exchange. The libraries of conquered cities contain complete collections of Greek philosophical works, preserved and extended by generations of Islamic scholars. Christian translators discover intellectual treasures that their own civilization had deliberately abandoned centuries earlier. Gerard of Cremona represents the vanguard of this translation movement. During his lifetime, he renders over 80 major works, from Arabic into Latin, including comprehensive versions of Aristotelian texts that European scholars have never seen. His translations carry more than just ancient Greek insights. They include the sophisticated commentaries and methodological innovations that Islamic thinkers developed through centuries of systematic investigation. The impact on European intellectual life proves immediate and revolutionary. Christian scholars encounter systematic empirical methodology for the first time in their cultural experience. The careful biological observations that characterize Aristotelian natural philosophy challenge theological approaches that explain natural phenomena through direct divine intervention. The rigorous logical frameworks that structure Aristotelian argumentation expose weaknesses in traditional Christian reasoning that relies primarily on scriptural authority. Most unsettling, the comprehensive scope of Aristotelian systematic investigation suggests that human reason can achieve reliable knowledge about natural phenomena without requiring divine revelation. This possibility threatens fundamental assumptions about the relationship between faith and knowledge that have defined Christian intellectual culture since Augustine. The challenge arrives at precisely the moment when European civilization develops institutional structures capable of supporting systematic intellectual activity. The cathedral schools that emerged during the Carolingian Renaissance evolve into the first universities. Paris, Bologna, Oxford, and Cambridge establish academic programs that attract students from across Europe. These emerging universities face a critical decision. They can maintain traditional theological curricula focused on scriptural commentary and doctrinal interpretation, or they can integrate the systematic methodologies that Arabic translations have made available, risking theological controversy but gaining access to intellectual tools of unprecedented power. The decision varies by institution and historical circumstance. Some universities initially resist Aristotelian innovations as dangerous to Christian faith. Others embrace them enthusiastically, generating conflicts with ecclesiastical authorities that sometimes result in official condemnations and academic sanctions. But the most influential resolution emerges from the brilliant synthetic work of Thomas Aquinas in 13th century Paris. Aquinas recognizes that Aristotelian systematic methodology and Christian theological commitment need not remain permanently incompatible. Properly understood, rational investigation of natural phenomena can support rather than undermine religious faith. The systematic order that Aristotelian science reveals in natural processes provides evidence for the divine intelligence that Christians believe created and sustains the universe. His integration proceeds with methodical precision that rivals Aristotelian systematic investigation itself. Natural reason and divine revelation address complementary rather than competing domains of human concern. Philosophical investigation using Aristotelian methodology can achieve reliable knowledge about the natural world. Theological reflection based on scriptural authority provides essential insights about supernatural realities that exceed the limits of human rational capacity. This synthetic approach resolves the apparent conflict between faith and reason that has troubled Christian intellectuals since Arabic translations first appeared in European universities. It legitimizes systematic empirical investigation within Christian intellectual culture while preserving the authority of religious revelation in matters that transcend natural human understanding. The Thomistic synthesis transforms medieval Christianity from an intellectual culture suspicious of systematic investigation into one that actively promotes rational inquiry as a form of religious devotion. Understanding the natural world becomes a way of appreciating divine creativity. Developing human rational capacities fulfills, rather than threatens, the religious calling to know and love God. The institutional consequences prove revolutionary. European universities begin establishing comprehensive curricula that integrate Aristotelian logic, natural philosophy, ethics, and political theory with traditional Christian theology. Students learn systematic methodology alongside scriptural interpretation. Faculty develop research programs that combine empirical observation with theological reflection. Most importantly, the university system creates institutional frameworks that can support sustained intellectual activity across generations. Unlike the Islamic schools where individual scholars preserved and extended classical learning through personal initiative, European universities develop corporate structures that transcend individual mortality. Knowledge accumulates systematically within institutional settings, designed to promote collaborative investigation over indefinite time periods. The transformation accelerates during the 13th and 14th centuries. Scholars like Albertus Magnus demonstrate that Aristotelian biological observations can be extended and refined through additional empirical investigation. Roger Bacon argues that systematic experimental methodology provides the most reliable path to natural knowledge. Duns Scotus develops logical innovations that push Aristotelian reasoning toward greater precision and sophistication. These developments establish the methodological foundations that will make the scientific revolution possible 3 centuries later. The systematic empirical investigation that characterizes modern science traces its institutional origins to medieval universities that integrated Aristotelian methodology with Christian intellectual culture. But the medieval resurrection involves more than just recovering ancient Greek texts. Islamic scholars who preserved and transmitted Aristotelian works also contributed original insights that significantly advanced human understanding beyond what ancient thinkers had achieved. Their commentaries, criticisms, and methodological innovations become integral parts of the intellectual heritage that European universities receive. The process demonstrates humanity's remarkable capacity for cultural synthesis across religious and ethnic boundaries. Knowledge develops most rapidly when different intellectual traditions encounter one another under conditions that permit productive exchange rather than mutual destruction. Yet tensions remain beneath the surface harmony that Thomistic synthesis appears to achieve. Some Christian authorities continue to regard Aristotelian methodology as potentially dangerous to religious faith. Some university scholars push rational investigation in directions that challenge traditional theological assumptions. The integration between reason and revelation that Aquinas accomplished remains intellectually demanding and institutionally fragile. These unresolved tensions will generate the philosophical and scientific controversies that define late medieval and early modern European intellectual development. The relationship between systematic empirical investigation and religious authority will continue to evolve through conflicts that sometimes produce creative synthesis and sometimes result in destructive confrontation. As the 14th century dawns, European civilization has successfully recovered the systematic intellectual tools that had been lost for nearly a millennium. The universities that now dot the European landscape from Lisbon to Prague provide institutional support for sustained rational investigation of natural phenomena. The methodological principles that made Aristotelian science possible operate once again within intellectual cultures capable of extending and refining them. But the ultimate test lies ahead. Can the renewed tradition of systematic empirical investigation generate discoveries that surpass even the remarkable achievements of ancient Greek natural philosophy? Can the institutional frameworks that medieval Christianity has created support intellectual developments that may challenge fundamental assumptions about reality itself? The stage is set for the greatest intellectual revolution in human history. The question that will define modern civilization hangs in the evening air above medieval universities. How far can systematic human reason extend its understanding of the natural world? The answer will emerge through investigations that neither Aristotle nor Aquinas could have imagined. But the tools they provided will prove essential for achievements that will transform human civilization beyond recognition. Cambridge, England, 1859. Charles Darwin stares at the manuscript that will shatter humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. 23 years of observation, classification, and systematic analysis culminate in a single revolutionary conclusion. Species are not fixed, eternal forms as Aristotle believed. They evolve through natural selection, transforming across generations in ways that the ancient Greek could never have imagined. Yet as Darwin traces the logical structure of his argument, he follows methodological principles that Aristotle established over 2 millennia earlier. Careful empirical observation, systematic classification of living organisms, rigorous analysis of causal relationships. The very tools that enabled Darwin to overthrow Aristotelian biology had been forged in the workshops of the Lyceum. The irony cuts to the heart of modern science's complex relationship with its ancient foundations. For 3 centuries, the scientific revolution has systematically dismantled the cosmic architecture that Aristotelian natural philosophy constructed. Galileo's telescope revealed that celestial bodies are not perfect, unchanging spheres, but worlds marked by mountains, craters, and atmospheric disturbances. Newton's mathematics demonstrated that terrestrial and celestial motion follow identical laws rather than operating according to fundamentally different principles. Harvey's anatomical investigations showed that blood circulates continuously rather than being consumed as Aristotelian medicine claimed. Each discovery appears to invalidate ancient Greek understanding of natural phenomena. The geocentric cosmos gives way to heliocentric solar systems. Eternal species yield to evolutionary transformation. The 4-element theory dissolves beneath atomic chemistry. Aristotelian physics collapses under the weight of mathematical mechanics. Yet beneath these surface contradictions, deeper continuities emerge that reveal the enduring power of systematic methodology itself. Darwin's evolutionary theory validates core insights that Aristotelian biology achieved through pure observation. The ancient Greeks' detailed studies of animal reproduction, embryonic development, and anatomical structure anticipated discoveries that modern science confirms with enhanced precision. His recognition that living organisms exhibit purposive behavior that distinguishes them from inanimate matter finds new expression in evolutionary explanations of adaptive complexity. Most remarkably, Darwin's systematic approach to biological classification builds directly upon taxonomic principles that Aristotle pioneered in the Lyceum. The hierarchical organization that groups organisms according to structural similarities while distinguishing them through specific differences provides the logical foundation for understanding evolutionary relationships. Species, genera, families, and orders represent not arbitrary human constructions, but natural categories that reflect actual patterns of descent with modification. The validation extends far beyond biological investigation. Modern scientific methodology follows procedural guidelines that Aristotelian systematic investigation established as universal standards for reliable knowledge. Careful empirical observation precedes theoretical speculation. Multiple sources of evidence support major conclusions. Alternative explanations receive systematic consideration. Findings remain open to revision based on new evidence or improved analysis. These methodological principles transcend particular theoretical commitments. They provide tools for distinguishing genuine insight from wishful thinking, empirical discovery from mere speculation, probable truth from sheer possibility. The scientific revolution succeeds not by abandoning Aristotelian methodology, but by applying it with unprecedented rigor and institutional support. Yet the modern reckoning reveals fundamental limitations in ancient Greek understanding that systematic investigation itself has exposed. Aristotelian natural philosophy operated within conceptual frameworks that reflected the limited observational capabilities available to classical antiquity. Without telescopes, microscopes, or precision measuring instruments, even the most systematic investigation could achieve only approximate understanding of natural phenomena. The technological revolution that accompanies modern scientific development transforms the empirical foundations upon which systematic methodology operates. Instruments extend human sensory capabilities far beyond their natural limits. Mathematical techniques enable precise quantification of relationships that ancient observers could only describe qualitatively. Experimental procedures create controlled conditions that reveal causal connections invisible to ordinary observation. These enhanced capabilities generate discoveries that challenge fundamental assumptions about reality itself. Quantum mechanics reveals that atomic phenomena operate according to probabilistic principles that contradict everyday experience of causal determination. Relativity theory demonstrates that space and time possess dynamic properties that classical physics never anticipated. Evolutionary biology shows that biological complexity emerges through natural processes that require no intelligent design. The philosophical implications stagger contemplation. If quantum indeterminacy operates at the most fundamental level of physical reality, what happens to Aristotelian assumptions about rational cosmic order? If space-time itself evolves dynamically, how can eternal logical principles provide unchanging foundations for systematic knowledge? If biological complexity emerges through blind natural selection, where is the teleological purpose that ancient Greeks perceived in natural phenomena? These questions push the boundaries of systematic investigation toward domains that Aristotelian methodology may not be equipped to explore. The logical frameworks that proved adequate for understanding classical physics encounter paradoxes when applied to quantum mechanical phenomena. The causal explanations that illuminate biological structures become problematic when extended to cosmic evolution. The empirical observations that ground natural science confront theoretical entities that exceed direct observational access. Yet even as modern science transcends classical limitations, it continues to operate according to systematic principles that trace their intellectual lineage directly to Aristotelian innovation. The university structures that support contemporary research follow organizational models pioneered at the Lyceum. The peer review processes that validate scientific discoveries apply critical standards that ancient Greek methodology established. The collaborative investigation that characterizes modern research programs reflects institutional approaches that Aristotle created for the first time in human history. More profoundly, the systematic integration that distinguishes authentic science from mere technical accumulation exemplifies intellectual virtues that Aristotelian philosophy cultivated above all others. The commitment to comprehensive understanding rather than narrow specialization. The insistence on logical coherence across diverse domains of investigation. The recognition that empirical observation and rational analysis must work together to achieve reliable knowledge. Contemporary scientists who study chaos theory rediscover mathematical patterns that exhibit the rational order Aristotle insisted characterized natural phenomena. Molecular biologists who investigate genetic mechanisms find systematic organization at cellular levels that ancient Greeks could never have imagined but would immediately recognize as confirming their deepest insights about natural teleology. Cognitive scientists who analyze neural networks uncover logical processes that operate according to principles Aristotelian psychology anticipated through pure rational reflection. The modern reckoning thus reveals neither simple validation nor complete refutation of ancient Greek natural philosophy. Instead, it demonstrates the remarkable power of systematic methodology to transcend its original theoretical applications while preserving its essential logical structure. The tools that Aristotle forged for understanding his world prove capable of extension and refinement that enable understanding of realities he could never have conceived. As the 21st century unfolds, the deepest questions that drive scientific investigation remain recognizably Aristotelian in their fundamental character. What systematic principles govern natural phenomena across all scales of organization? How can human reason achieve reliable knowledge about realities that exceed direct empirical access? What relationship exists between logical necessity and empirical contingency in the structure of natural law? These questions guide research programs that employ technological capabilities and mathematical techniques far beyond anything available to classical antiquity. But they pursue understanding through systematic methodologies that retain essential features of the intellectual revolution that began in the Lyceum's covered walkways over 2 millennia ago. The ancient Greek who dared to systematize all human knowledge could not have imagined smartphones, but his principles of logical classification make their technology possible. He could not have foreseen quantum mechanics, but his insistence on empirical observation provides the methodological foundation for experimental physics. He could not have anticipated evolutionary biology, but his systematic approach to anatomical investigation enables the comparative studies that reveal phylogenetic relationships. The question that will define humanity, his intellectual future, emerges with crystal clarity from this historical reckoning. Can the systematic methodologies that enabled modern scientific achievement continue to generate reliable knowledge about realities that may transcend the conceptual frameworks within which they originally developed? The answer waits in laboratories and universities, where contemporary researchers push the boundaries of systematic investigation toward domains that even Aristotelian imagination could never have anticipated.